Alright, so after all of the countless delays to the point that I was practically losing track of this, we finally have the latest Bond movie with No Time to Die, and we also have two completely and totally different Oscar Isaacs that we're going to be talking about also. But let's go ahead and start with No Time to Die, which is been being built up as Daniel Craig's last Bond movie, and obviously this is a really sort of big, almost kind of ceremonial thing, especially with people seeing it as Craig has completely, rebuilt Bond and turned it into this brand new thing and brought in a whole bunch of new fans from 2006 to now in this really big way. And that is great, but I have also expressed quite a bit that I've never had too much of a connection to Craig's Bond, even though Skyfall is like one of my favorites in the entire franchise. But going into this, there is still a lot of appeal to it, especially since we've been doing this whole pattern thing of Craig's Bond movies being like Casino Royale was considered great, and then Quantum of Solace wasn't, and then Skyfall was great, and then obviously Spectre was what it was. So it's time. It was time for him to hopefully it would come back around to that pattern, and he would be able to end on greatness. And much like a lot of these, I did feel like maybe naively, but I was very optimistic when we got not just our opening, but the fact that we basically get two different openings. Like, both of these would be, like, their own individual cold opens for other movies, but we get both of them in this one. Starting with the younger version of Leo Soddy's character, Madeline, and she is seemingly terrorized by this person that has come to kill her father. And the way this is built up is basically, it feels like a horror movie in a way. And this whole introduction by way of who's going to be the villain of the movie, which feels kind of unique. It was giving me From Russia with Love vibes. How the cold open for From Russia with Love was the introduction of Grant, the Robert Shaw character, and it's like to go back to that territory is very interesting to the point that it doesn't feel too much like. At first I was like, is it taking too much of a focus off of Bond to have the opening be the villain, especially since it was such a big opening compared to the one in From Russia with Love is brief, but enough to set up that character. But that one was also the first cold open of the entire franchise. But once it was kind of getting that feeling, then we got our what I guess you could call the second opening, which is a whole build up that leads to a whole other gigantic action scene. And when this particular chase scene was happening, I was getting it was like I feel like this is gonna be like I already feel like this could be one of the best movies of the franchise, based on these two openings we're getting in one. And then I kind of had to keep stopping myself because it was like, well, remember Spectre's open. Like, don't be naive. Remember Spectre's opening and how amazing that was and how it built up. Like, oh my God, this could be one of the best movies that Bond ever had. But it's obviously Spectre ended up being the rest of what it was. So I was very cautiously optimistic, but optimism was at a high by the time we got the opening credits and all that. And then once it begins, after that really incredible openings, really, it does go into this territory where we can see how well shot it's going to be, because that was one of the things, especially about Skyfall, that really stood out. And then just this very first shot of the guy scaling down the building was like, okay, we're still going, so I feel like there's really gonna be something to this. This is gonna be great. And Hugh Dennis being in this opening scene was great as well. Very surprising. I had no idea he was in this, but I was so happy to see him for that 1 or 2 minutes. And in this area, we kind of get the introduction to what exactly the threat is going to be, because I'm probably like many people, even though I avoid advertisements and trailers and stuff like that, I was watching this movie's like IMDb and Wikipedia pages like a hawk, because I was really curious what direction they were going to go. There was that whole theory about with the title, if Rami Malek was going to end up being Doctor No or something like that. But I kind of kept watching it, and the only thing they were really saying was that the biggest threat, Bond would ever see, and he has a new like the way he's using technology as a weapon in like a new way that has never been seen. And we get a lot of doses of that throughout it, seeing how there's clearly like some sort of advanced technology going on with what this villain has at his disposal. I I will say that, and I don't know if this is on me or the movie. It could be either one. Um, Even by the time we got to the very end of the movie and we had seen all these different sort of examples of this technology and how it was used, I still didn't feel like I quite had a grasp on it, exactly how it worked. And I don't know if that's the point or what it is, but that was something I was kind of trying to piece together the whole time that kind of maybe took away from that plot element a little bit. Well, once again, that could just be me, but that could also be the movie not quite setting things up as well as they could. Not that you have to be like spoon fed it necessarily, but to set it up enough to where you don't have to like question exactly what's going on throughout the whole thing after you've seen it used multiple times. But yeah, so that was distracting a little bit, but. Going into some of the relationships here, where we do have the way the opening sets up this whole idea of obviously Lea Seydoux comes from Spectre, so there's the whole possibility that she may or may not eventually betray him at some point. And how once again, we talked about, me and my brother did this whole big Bond video that's on this channel where we went through the whole franchise, and it's peaks and valleys and ups and downs and stuff like that. And one of the things that I never really cared for about Craig's Bond was just how like he's just constantly falling in love. Now it's like, yeah, we had On Her Majesty's Secret Service, where Bond actually fell in love enough to get married before Blofeld and Irma Bond kind of put a stop to that. But still, it was like kind of a one-time thing, and like maybe once or twice or three times they brought it back throughout the franchise just in kind of a quick reference. But it seems like Craig's Bond was doing that like all the fucking time. And that's something that kind of felt like it was taking away from the character as we knew it a little bit. And we know, I get that Craig is doing something different and kind of setting up this whole thing where, instead of it being like an episodic thing, like all of his movies are tied together. And I feel like that's something that I might appreciate more in retrospect once like we've had another Bond and then we go through their whole thing, and then it's like, oh, it's kind of cool to look back and see which one each different one did. And Craig's thing was that it was like one storyline. But I mean, as of right now, in the moment, that's not really something I'm into. And I think a lot of it has to do with if the characters were maybe more interesting, that would be one thing. But like, I was really concerned going in when I learned that Lea Seydoux was coming back and Madeline as a character was coming back in this one, because I thought she by far she was the weakest aspect of Spectre, and Spectre has a lot of weak spots. But I thought she was that character was especially what really brought Spectre down, and the fact that this movie is really like that character is such a foundation for this movie was a little troubling, because I still don't quite think their chemistry is better here than it is in Spectre, but I still don't think it's worthy of the entire movie being like held by it. So that's something that I guess, depending on how you feel about that character, is going to be how strongly you feel about the emotional foundation of this movie, I guess you could call it. And obviously there's going to be other characters coming in, like Ana de Armas was built up a lot as being another new sort of Bond girl. And what I really like about her, especially since she's blowing up so much now, is that I've seen some people complain that she's not in it enough. And I can get that because the character leaves you wanting more, but I think that's why the character works so much, is she's here just enough and leaves you with that, I hope I see that character again at some point. And because the way she comes in, and there's something so, like the relationship between, first off, I love the fact that, especially since Craig's Bond just falls in love at the drop of a hat, to have a Bond girl come in and have like a totally professional relationship with him. Like, this is it's almost like she's a character that was the star of her own movie and then just kind of came through this one. And like I said, it's like really just one scene or two scenes, but she leaves just enough of that impact, and like to the point where, like, when you talk about getting wrapped up in the characters and involved in the characters, it's like when, after they've done everything and they've worked together and they've gone through this action scene, the scene ends with Bond basically saying, like, you're really good at your job. This was this was kind of a fun mission to do together, and that's the way you feel as an audience. Also, how the character just kind of comes in and surprises you, and but like I said, I think the fact that she leaves us wanting more is exactly the best way to do that. So I wouldn't. While I really like this character, the little bit we saw her, I don't come away from it saying there should have been more, because I feel like if she had like come back for the climax or something, then that might have sort of sucked a little bit out of the magic of just like sort of the come and go that it was in the middle. But yeah, but if we were to see that character again with another Bond, that's something I could be into. So one character that we have that is returning finally is Jeffrey Wright's Felix Leiter. And I was like he was in Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace, and then it's like when Skyfall and Spectre came out, it was I know Leiter wasn't like a constant character throughout the franchise, but it's still like I was still kind of hoping he'd come back eventually. So we do have him here, and he is like the back and forth that he has with Bond in this way that we never really saw before. I mean, obviously he had like a connection to Leiter before, especially in stuff like License to Kill. But here in particular, the back and forth between them is just seeing Bond with a dude that's basically like a buddy, like really comes through in this really great way. In this way where Jeffrey Wright's one of those actors where he can just come in and completely own everything, and it's almost like he's barely trying. Like he just has so much of a presence and is just so effortless in how he can, pull off a character or a scene or whatever. It's always amazing to watch. I think that's one of the reasons I was like always hoping eventually we'd see his Leiter at least one more time. So there is that. Um, there is another new character that was like causing controversy, but you could tell it was controversy that was just like manufactured. And like there were headlines. It was one of those cases where people were taking advantage of the fact that people just read headlines, they don't read articles, or even look into or research anything. They just see one thing that looks like that might outrage them, and they'll just run with it, as if it's fact. And there was the whole thing of this woman that comes in, who's going to take over the 007 number. But it's pretty clear when you see the setup where that's coming from, because you're never going to believe this, but Craig's Bond goes off the grid again. Right? So, naturally, when he is no longer that number is going to be handed off. But but there's like a whole running joke there to where it's like he pretends to not be upset by it, but he clearly is, and they have like a banter right there, and it's the kind of thing that's not going to be the permanence that people probably built it up in their heads it was going to be. This small group of people that was like super duper outraged by it, that don't matter, but obviously the smaller voices can be the loudest ones, and that's how that shit happens. But it's not a big deal at all. Like, it's not even there. Basically it's a joke throughout the movie is what it is. Like, it's not just fuck off. But another thing that I thought was gonna be really fun about this, and is briefly, is the idea that Christoph Waltz is still Blofeld, and while Spectre was the disappointment that it was, and by the time Waltz was like really, really becoming Blofeld in Spectre was when it was like, for fuck's sake, when is this gonna end? Which because Spectre, I still feel like I'm watching Spectre. That's how long it feels, but still, the idea of having him as like the Hannibal Lecter now, where he's he was captured at the end of Spectre, and now he's in this big maximum security prison, and Bond has to come to him. And I almost feel like Benoit Blanc came out a little bit in this scene, where it's like they set up a lot of intimidation around Blofeld. Like, he gets a huge build up when he comes out, almost to a comical degree. But when Bond starts talking to him, it's almost like he became a different character. It was really weird. But like I said, maybe that was just Knives Out coming out or something. But Yeah, so I like that idea of having Blofeld as like this looming figure. There is one moment where we just hear Blofeld's voice, and it gives off that vibe we were talking about before. The scene that I loved in Spectre, when they were at like it looked like the Eyes Wide Shut party, and everybody was like shrouded in shadows, and there was a whole bunch of people there, and Waltz just like turns to him and says his name like he knew he was there the whole time. We get something akin to that. The first time Blofeld's kind of introduced into this movie, which is fun, but short lived. Um, Another thing that we have here is whether it's going to be, because obviously the whole Craig Bond thing is like going really dark and gritty and stuff like that, and it's like, cursing the days of Roger Moore and stuff like that. That's the one moment I don't like in Skyfall, when Q says something condescending about exploding pens. First off, as if this movie doesn't also have ridiculous technology in it. And secondly, speaking ill of GoldenEye, it's like, you don't fucking do that. And it's like when it's almost trying to be condescending about it, how serious it is. But there are times where we do have those sort of Roger Moore moments, and they do bring life into it. As like they're few and far between, but the fact that they just add that little thing to it kind of makes Craig less sort of just a blank sort of nothingness, just one scowling face with explosions around it is what I feel like a lot of his Bond was, and where I didn't really feel that connection. I know I'm completely in the minority, so don't. But you do have these moments, like the scene in Spectre, when he like falls and he lands on the couch and then he like adjusts his cuff or whatever. Is like moments like that, and we get this moment in this one when he has the martini tray and he uses it as a weapon, and then he drinks the martini on it. Like, stuff like that is the stuff that I feel like brings... Like, I get where people would think it's, too much, like in the Moore era, where it's, like, all that. But, like, just the little sprinkles of it in this Craig Bond are something that kind of helps bring the character more to life in a way that I like, even if they're brief. But with all that said, I find it interesting that if I hadn't seen the movie and I was seeing this video from like the future, I would find it really interesting. I hadn't mentioned Rami Malek yet, because I was very much excited about him playing this character, especially if it was going to be like a super duper big threat. But I do wish I had gotten more out of what Rami Malek is bringing here, but it's also the fact that the character's kind of barely in the movie. Billy Magnuson plays a new character, and he's kind of much more, even though he's like sort of the nice classic henchman sort of vibe, it feels like he's much more of the villain of the movie for a long time, before Rami Malek is, because Malek is in it so little, and also what his plan is almost seems to kind of dwarf him as a person, which is interesting, but I think it's not necessarily just that the villain is in the movie for so little, because obviously it's, over an hour into Skyfall before we even see Silva, but in that second half, Silva got to basically be one of the best Bond villains ever, period. But the thing here is that when it got to the point where it was clear Rami Malek was going to finally kind of be in the movie steadily, we're basically at the climax. And while that in itself, like, while it doesn't feel like he has enough to make an impact as a character, I think another problem might be that he's a little bit miscast, which is unfortunate because I think Rami Malek would be a great Bond villain with more to do. But it feels like the character's supposed to be a lot older, especially given the opening scene. But I don't know if it was that case of... Like, I would say when this was going into production was probably right around the time he had just won his Oscar, so it was probably like, who's like the really big thing right now and who could make a really cool Bond villain, and it's like, oh, here's Rami Malek. But it's like, I don't know if this was the part that would have... Like I said, I can absolutely see this happening, but I don't know if this was the right part or not, which is unfortunate. But, yeah, I even when he is here and he's making his, speeches and all that stuff and being sinister, there is something there, but I don't know necessarily if, more of that would have benefited, given that he might just be miscast in general. But it's just in general, I just was really hoping to get a little more out of it than I did. But yeah, I think that's just a lot of things kind of working against that whole idea of going into it, hoping a particular actor plays a character in this really great way, when the part was just kind of never really built up to be that. So that's kind of a letdown. But like I said, when you see the big picture of the movie, you can kind of get a sense of, this, if this character had been maybe like a lesser known actor or something, or something that somebody didn't have so much build up behind them, it might not have been as underwhelming as it was. So that's just kind of how that plays out. And obviously everything in between what I've already talked about is just like Madeline bullshit. So, and Bond, like, trying to potentially fall in love again, but Vesper's still looming and all that. And it slows the movie down a lot. Like the movie is long. Like I was optimistic once again about the opening, because it was like, I mean, if this is, I mean, obviously, it's not going to be non-stop action all the time, because even that would eventually get tiresome. But I was feeling good about the pacing of the movie for a while, despite the fact that the movie is 2 hours and 43 minutes, which is the longest Bond movie by like 20 minutes. And it was like, so it was like, even though I was excited for this movie, I still went into it thinking, you better fucking earn this runtime. Which I would say about any, long movie, even if I'm really, looking forward to it. And it's late when it starts to feel like a slog, but it does eventually get there. Like in that sort of, there's like maybe a 20-minute window before we're starting to sort of edge into the climax, and it's kind of in there, and it's Madeline stuff, of course. And they introduce another factor into this, and it's like, you guys are just I mean, I get the idea of like shaping Bond into your own thing, but I mean, they really, really took to that whole, it's like making it feel less and less like the Bond character that we know, and that's the thing, is like whether you're attached to that or not. I could see people wanting something new, and seeing the people that just want, well, this isn't the character I know, because obviously Bond's going to be different from actor to actor and from era to era. And like, so I hate being that person that like says, oh no, this isn't that character, because obviously things are going to differ. But I guess it's just what changes they are and what directions they go, or like, I'm not feeling it. Like, that's just an individual person. So there's a lot of people that could really, really be into this, and all these changes. But I guess the last thing I should mention before we go into the ending is, have I mentioned Cary Fukunaga's name yet? Who has taken over directing, of course, and does very well with it. Like, the action scenes are really well done, and I can like everything is well shot. Like, even these scenes that are like, the scenes that aren't really grabbing me are still like really well shot and well put together. And it's like, it's one of those cases where Fukunaga's somebody that's interesting enough that as far as like the whole director for hire attitude, where it's like a lot of the older Bond movies especially, were kind of the same directors that just kind of were on this like revolving door, and it was like there was nothing really visually spectacular going on. It's like here, it's like when you think of the idea of the visuals that Sam Mendes set up, especially, and how well shot Skyfall was and stuff like that. And how good Spectre looked, especially that opening scene. And it's like living up to that would have been a task. But it looks very well done also. And like I said, the way the action things are put together, because that's usually where a director that's not known for a certain kind of style will falter, is like bringing the action scene into it. Which, of course, obviously he's also known for True Detective, which had that, one particular scene. And, like, I don't know if people were expecting a lot of scenes like that one, but we do get that vibe where, like, action scenes will go unbroken, which is really nice, especially after fucking Quantum of Solace. So, there's that. So, I guess I don't normally do this, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the ending. So we'll just say there's like if you haven't figured it out by now, what I'm about to say is going to be super 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 spoilery. So if you're already still here, you apparently don't care, and or you've already seen it, obviously. I am going to talk about those spoilers right now. So if you haven't left already, it's your own fucking fault. So as the climax was happening, and we get this sort of, I was getting, weirdly enough, I was getting Gladiator vibes, where Commodus stabbed Maximus with the poison blade, and then the climax happened, and that poison's kind of happening the whole time. Um, this whole idea of if, Bond should escape this, he's not going to be able to touch the people that he loves, and he will kill them. And setting up that whole vibe was like, oh, I wonder how he'll get out of this. And then that's basically what the climax is something else happens, and you're like, oh, I wonder how he's going to get out of this. Okay, they're setting up a lot of stuff. He's going to, like, the climax can't be going for much longer. How could he possibly get out of all of this? But I mean, surely he will, because he's Bond. Craig's Bond, especially. And then it was this sort of finality setting in. And it's like things were really closing in more and more. And you keep asking yourself, is he really going to cut it this close? Wow, this is going to be... Like, I actually feel concerned for Bond, even though he always gets out of it. But this is looking pretty dire. I wonder how this is going to go. And even when it got to the point when it was clear there was no way out, it was still like, there's going to be something here. What I really, really appreciate, given that they were going this direction, and they want us to believe they're going in this direction, was there could have easily been a way to do this that still left it out. But the shot of the explosion with Bond in it, it feels like there's no way you can deny it. So, because I feel like if we hadn't gotten that particular shot of Bond and the explosion in the same frame, you'd be hearing all kinds of stuff about how, oh, he got out in some way, he did something. He did the Bruce Wayne Dark Knight Rises thing somehow. But the fact that they really committed to the finality of, it feels weird saying this, killing Bond in a Bond movie is what, like I was talking about. You want to talk about them taking Bond as their own and doing whatever the hell they wanted with him. They rode that wave to the very end. It was wild because, like I said, I don't have a connection to Craig's Bond at all. So it's like, this didn't completely ruin my day, like seeing Tony Stark die, but it was weird. Like, it was surreal to, like, come home that day and, like, sit in the idea of, I just watched James Bond die. Like, whether it was Craig or not, that's, like, a heavy thing, because obviously, I've been into the whole Bond thing since I was, like, 6 or 7. That's a very, very large chunk of my life. That's, like, practically the whole thing. And that was, like, a weird thing to grasp, but it was, like, the whole idea of, like, seeing Tony Stark die, or seeing Wolverine die, how that's a weird sort of trend now, is actually sticking to killing your main characters and your franchise characters. And it's like, it did feel heavy, and it does feel heavy, and even though we know, the next one's going to be a new actor, and it's going to be... I'm assuming we're going to stick with what we've been doing throughout the franchises, where we have a new Bond, but, like, Ray Fiennes is still M, and Ben Whishaw is still Q, and Naomi Harris is still Moneypenny. Roy Kinnear is still Tanner. I'm assuming that'll be one of those things, and it's the whole thing of... It'll just, like, be another storyline. I'm like, if they were... Like, I can't see them, like, even, touching on the fact of... Because, obviously, the whole Bond being a codename thing was put to rest in Skyfall, so there's a whole other thing here of, it's like... Is there going to be references to the fact that the previous Bond died, or is it just going to be, here's the new Bond, these are the same supporting characters we know, and here's a new mission, the end. That would be in line, I feel like, with the rest of the franchise. But this leaves such an interesting opening. So I'll be very curious to see if, like, the previous Bond died is addressed at all, because then, yeah, but I don't know, it's going to have to be an entirely different story, like an entirely different universe. But as we've seen Judi Dench, carry over from Brosnan to Craig, with Craig being like a whole different sort of universe in himself. I can see them, like, that's the way this franchise works. Is I'm assuming it'll just be the new actor and we'll just go. But yeah, I'll be of course, depending on how far away that is now. Like, it does feel weird, and I was especially having weird thoughts because I was thinking about how it reminded me of Tony Stark's death, which is interesting because the reason that hit so hard is because it felt like we'd been on this lifelong journey with Tony Stark. And then I remembered Daniel Craig has been Bond 2 years longer than Downey was Tony Stark, which is mind blowing because it feels like that whole Marvel universe has been around forever. But then this is how long Craig has been Bond. It's been like this whole era. And that's another thing also when we were talking about how, like, the impact that Craig has made as far as a Bond, and how, there's like a whole generation of Bond fans now that, like, Craig is their one because of that. And it's like, I forget that, like, I was talking about, how long I've been a Bond fan in general. Half of my lifespan, Craig has been Bond, which is wild. Yeah, and I think especially with the fact that that's only 5 movies, which for a Bond typically is average, but over that span of time, that many years, is pretty stretched out. So yeah, so even though I don't have the emotional connection to Craig's Bond, there's still something there. Like, there was still like I felt something at the end of this movie, that's wild. So yeah, so a lot of mixed feelings on this one, but it's the comments you'll keep hearing probably are it's obviously not as good as Skyfall, but it's a lot better than Spectre, and that's, like, as lazy as that is to say, because it's hard to beat Skyfall and it's not hard to beat Spectre, makes that sort of a moot point. But that's, yeah, this one has really, really high highs. Like, we've talked about how, Spectre has low lows, but it also had really high highs, and that's where it's kind of, your opinions of Spectre can be sort of all over the place. I do feel, stronger about this as a movie in total. So it does have a lot of great aspects, but it's not, like this could be one of the best of the franchise, like I was thinking for the first half hour, but that was my own naivete coming through, and I kind of knew, like, to have that in the back of my head, like, don't think that this early. We've seen what happens. But yeah. So I would say this is a pretty good send off for Craig, and I will be interested to see who the next one will be, and if I kind of take to them a little more than I took to Craig throughout. So we'll see what happens. So, with all that said, let's go to the Addams Family 2. Because we need yet another soulless, pointless, who gives a fuck animated movie. So, and it's like, just as soon as this started, this movie had been on for like 5 minutes, and I don't want it to sound like I don't give movies a chance, going in, like I go in hating them and all that, but I mean, 5 minutes in, it's like, yeah, this is definitely an animated movie from 2021. Because we're just... I mean, obviously, soulless animated movies have been around since forever, but I mean, I feel like we're really, really at a certain peak here, if that's the word you want to call it, as far as, stuff just getting churned out that just means absolutely nothing, and you just feel absolutely nothing towards. So we've got a new plot here, and I remember so little about the first movie. I was trying to remember, like, how even different the story was going to be. I feel like the first one had something to do with, like, I don't even know, people were, like, trying to make the neighborhood nice or something. I really don't remember. And so this one, has a couple of things going on. They've got this. There's nothing that would have made this movie better or worse if the title hadn't just been Addams Family Vacation, which I'm kind of surprised it's not. So it's them, and they're in a camper, and they're going to, different places, and they're gonna run into, like, they're gonna do their Addams Family thing and make normal people uncomfortable. It's the joke it's always been. It's the joke it's always gonna be. Just now we're in different locations, I guess. And the characters are more soulless and not as funny or fun or memorable. We get jokes like, and I can't remember if this is in the first one or not, but we get jokes like, Thing, the hand drives the car and he pulls up in the car. And because Thing is the driver, the front license plate says talk to the hand. And it's like, I'm not sure which decade this was written in. But that's what you're going to be asking yourself throughout the whole movie. It's like, how long ago was this written and why didn't they update anything? Obviously, Cousin It is voiced by Snoop Dogg. So, Cousin It's ringtone is Drop It Like It's Hot. Because we're in the early 2000s or something. I don't know. There's a lot of that too. There's a lot of music cues that really don't fit, but that's just animated movies now. But we have some sort of plot going on here, multiple plots. We have the whole vacation aspect, but there's also this whole thing about how Wednesday's at the science fair, and she's doing, something about mutations, Uncle Fester's turning into an octopus through the whole movie because of some experiment. But then there's this other whole thing about how Wednesday might not actually be an Addams, she might be adopted or something, and she might have a biological parent somewhere, and that's its own thing. And there's this, I think it was Wallace Shawn. If it wasn't, it was somebody doing a Wallace Shawn impression. Following them around as this dude that's been hired to say, to take, Wednesday to her biological father or something. And that's basically the plot. As if this movie is not going to end with the reveal that obviously this movie's not going to end with Wednesday being somebody else's child. So the whole plot in general is useless, and there's no sort of investment you're going to have in that. So really, it's just about what's going to happen from scene to scene as they go from place to place is what the movie is. Every now and then we get, a new voice, Bill Hader, is here, which, invaluable as he is, cannot even save this. And if Bill Hader can't save you even a little bit, you're either Noel or you're a shitty animated movie. So, there's that. At least we'll forget it soon. Every now and then there's something impressive, when they go, one of the first places they go is Niagara Falls, and the way the water's animated was it was almost distracting how good it was. That's all I was looking. There's a point in time where they go over the falls and the barrel and shit, and then they're floating in the water. And they were having some dialogue or something. They were trying to say jokes or something, but I just kept staring at the water. I was like, this is really well animated. Oh, nice. And then they went somewhere else. That's really the only time I remember the animation standing out is fucking water. So that's the excitement level we're at with Addams Family 2. The Addams Family 2 is as exciting as water. So, there you go. And it's, we're going to get a whole bunch of jokes about how pleasant things are actually terrifying to them, and terrifying things are actually pleasant to them. He scares Pugsley, Gomez scares Pugsley by talking about, puppies with bows or something. And it's yeah, we know the jokes. What was it? It was a show way back whenever, the 50s or 60s or something. Then we had the Barry Sonnenfeld movies in the 90s, which were great. I think we might have had an animated show or something, and a couple of TV movies or something. Now we're here, and guess what? It's still the jokes. We're still on the same jokes. Just with this voice cast, it's not really bringing anything. Charlize and Morticia is a nice idea, voice-wise. And, Oscar Isaac just slumming it, I guess. As Gomez, not really given anything to do. Chloe Moretz as Wednesday, not really given anything to do. They had to replace Pugsley, because Finn Wolfhard grew up and didn't have the same voice. So they just got, some random, kid or something. Nick Kroll is here, being increasingly annoying as Uncle Fester, and so on. So there's that. And like I said, things will happen. There will be music cues. They'll go from one place to the next. There's one point where, as I've talked about with so many animated movies, we have to have a break where they sing and dance. Just because that's how small the ideas are in animated movies. So Lurch is at the piano singing, which I think is a joke they did in the last one, which was kind of funny, but now it's filler. He sings I Will Survive, and a whole bunch of people dance, and that goes on for a very long time, and you just wait for it to end. And speaking of, that's basically what a lot of these scenarios are, is they go to Texas. They go to, like, this restaurant in Texas. It's called the Alamo, because I think they mistake it for the real Alamo. And as soon as they walk in, we're told, there's a pageant going on for, small girls. And it's like, oh, I'll bet Wednesday gets roped up in that. I wonder how long this is going to take. And that's what this movie is. It's like, it's them setting up scenarios, and then you as the audience just ask, all right, well, how long is that going to go? Like, how long do we have to wait for that to end? And yeah, the pageant is a whole thing, and so on. And that's it. And then eventually we bring back the whole Wednesday might be somebody else's kid thing, and then we get a very boring and tiresome climax where a whole bunch of things happen. Like, people are flying around, things are fighting things, there's, like, creatures and shit. There's a girl that's like a pig or something, and you just watch this as you grow more and more exhausted until you're practically falling asleep. And then this movie finally has the decency and the mercy to just turn on the music that has nothing to do with the Addams Family while the credits come up. And of course there's little animations with the credits, because God forbid you can leave! So, yeah. By the way, we basically get 2 climaxes. Like, it's one of those cases where you're, like, just waiting for the climax to end. And then, like, just when you're like, oh, alright, that was a little abrupt, but I don't care, I'm ready, I'm done. But then a whole other thing. The villain morphs into a bigger thing. Same old shit. I don't know why these movies even happen. Like, I don't know who will get enjoyment. Like, obviously they're kids. And obviously kids will get enjoyment out of them, but that's the thing, though, is, like, the kids will get enjoyment out of them, and then they'll just go on to the next thing. It's like, those, like, if a movie is special enough, or, just the right amount of appealing, what kids do is they play the same movie over and over and over again. So I think the Addams Family 2 will never be that movie. The Addams Family 2 is the toy that they play with for like an hour that they really wanted, and then they'll never think about it again. And there's like so many animated movies like that now. It's almost like they're the predominant ones in the animated genre. And it's really disheartening. So that's what that is. Like, we talked about, the state of animation in that video earlier last month. But, yeah, the Addams Family 2 kind of really seems to represent, like, the sort of low... Like, it was like in the middle of the movie, I would have maybe said it was, like, on par with Minions, where it's, like, annoying and a drag, but it's not, like, the lowest of the low or anything. It's not like Norm of the North or something. It just exists, like, with no life whatsoever. But, I mean, the more it went on, the more I just really started to resent it for how lazy and just pure nothing it was. And it was like, the waste of time that it is like, it's made for kids, but it's like, kids grow up fast. They need that time. And movies like this take that time, and they never give it back. And they do nothing with it. They give them no experience whatsoever. They're just killing time. And it's like, by the time they get to, like, this age or older, they're gonna really wish they had that time. And the Addams Family, too, will have already taken it. Like it has taken mine, but so much of mine has already been taken anyway, it doesn't really matter anymore. The embrace of sweet death will soon come, and I will not have to see more movies like the Addams Family 2, so... There that is. Okay, let's pick ourselves back up now. Let's talk about The Card Counter, which is a movie I actually want to talk about. Which is Paul Schrader's new movie, his follow-up to First Reformed. And there are those directors, especially writer-directors, where when they put out a lot of movies, where they're not like a Tarantino that does like, you know, one event movie every now and then, but he's been steadily putting out movies for a while now. And like it gets to a point where you reach a movie like First Reformed, and it's like, oh, this is big. Like for the like this is like, you know, the sort of peak of their late career, and it's like whatever they do next is going to seem so low in comparison, or just seem average by comparison. But not Paul Schrader. Paul Schrader has done the card counter after First Reformed, and I really like First Reformed. Obviously, has a lot of stuff going on. In really deep and meaningful ways, and it's a movie that really sticks like into your mind. It just gets in there and welds itself and just stays there, and you can just think about it for the 3 years now since it's come out. It'll just stay in there, and I almost feel like I like the card counter. Like even like the card counter has left even more of an impression on me. I think I know some people are a bit underwhelmed by it, especially following First Reformed. But there's not a lot. What the thing about this movie is there's not a whole lot to it, which you could say about a lot of Schrader movies. But I mean, as far as people like the way it's sort of set up, people might come into the card counter expecting more, which is why I say that specifically now. Because I could see people coming into the card counter and expecting like Hard Eight, where we have, you know, Oscar Isaac and we have Ty Sheridan, and there's he's sort of like, you know, takes him under his wing a little bit and tells him like, you know. We see all the ways he, like, you know, plays blackjack and poker and stuff like that. And it's like, I can easily see people mistaking this for something like Hard Eight. And even though, you know, Hard Eight is a movie that's, you know, about Sydney, and just kind of has all that other stuff around it, there's still a lot of focus on that stuff. Any card playing in this movie is basically just a facade for this character that Oscar Isaac plays. Oscar Isaac, it's so funny, we just talked about the Addams Family 2 and how he was just sort of saying dialogue and coasting through it, because this has got to be one of Oscar Isaac's best performances, and he's obviously, you know, Oscar Isaac is a constant right now. Like, he had the Addams Family, but he's got this, he's got that Coppola movie, he's got Dune coming out, Scenes from a Marriage, and all of this is about the time you'd start getting sick of an actor. But after seeing this, I just want all the Oscar Isaac I can possibly get. I can't wait to get more of him in Dune. I can't wait to watch Scenes from a Marriage, which I'm going to do, like, this week. And everything else he has coming out. Because, obviously, he's already made a significant impression as an actor up to this point. Whether it be Llewyn Davis or Ex Machina, or even small parts like Drive or something. He is here to stay, and we're all the better for it. And what he's doing here especially is he's really showing this way that he has... Because a lot of Llewyn Davis, it feels like a lot of his acting was like in his eyes. And how he can just do, like, just have these really small expressions that just say so much. Or the way he can just, like, look at a particular person. He's just completely mastered that. And then he takes that mastery he's already established and puts it in this character. And this character is one of the more fascinating I've seen for a while, in my opinion anyway. And really what makes the movie what it is. Where it's like, he has this ability to be able to just look like a complete and total stone wall. And then just like I said, with just like a flick of the eyes or just something really small, it's like you're looking into the character's soul suddenly. Like you go, like, it's the two extremes, one right after the other. It's, this character's giving me nothing, I can't really, you know, penetrate what's going on. And then just by one look, you're, like, completely inside his head. And not just these little bursts of narration we get every now and then. Which are still, like... What's interesting about the narration especially is that we'll get just a little piece of it to, like, tell us what he's thinking in the moment. Or we'll see, like, how he, you know, sees a card game or something. Or just how he feels about somebody. Like Ty Sheridan, he'll just have, like, one quick thought about him. And it's like, even though we're getting these looks inside of exactly what he's thinking, there's still, like, a constant air of mystery. Like, there's still stuff that we have to unravel and that we have to eventually find out for ourselves as we keep watching and keep learning about what exactly it is that he's doing and where he's coming from and what exactly his goal is here. Because it's really all it is it's just a dude looking for atonement as we get to look into, like, his really fucking dark history. where he comes from, and how it's basically ever since when we first see him, he's in prison, and as we learn more and more about what he was in prison for, we realize that part of him is looking for atonement, and part of him just has a death wish. And it's like basically trying to overcome that feeling of having the death wish and trying to find that sort of coming out of that sort of fog. And we get that through Ty Sheridan's character, where he kind of sees this opening to like right a wrong. Like it's sort of a continuation. It's absolutely a continuation of what his past, what the results of his past were. And it's like just having this one little opening to maybe fix something. Obviously, you can't fix everything, but to just fix a little piece of it might be enough to get out of that really dark fog that you're in. And then we also have Tiffany Haddish's character come into this as well as somebody else that could potentially pull him out of this in a different way and sort of bring a new meaning to his life that might help sort of extinguish the horrible nature of what came before it, and hopefully making that just a distant memory rather than this thing that's completely engulfed his mind. Obviously I struggle with Tiffany Haddish, just kind of in general. And we've seen her kind of try to come over more into dramatic territory. Like we kind of saw a start of that in The Kitchen, which The Kitchen was just kind of a failure overall. But it's like we got glimpses of what she could be if she was like a regular movies like this, and was able to do it like sort of parallel with the comedy that she does, the comedy that I don't really care for either. But as it was hard, it's hard to sort of like, it seems like she could sort of struggles to fit into this kind of world still. But as it goes on, I was kind of able to get a bit more invested in her and kind of buy her as somebody that would be in this world with the way she's already placed into the story, and then what her purpose ultimately one of her purposes ultimately ends up being. Makes sense. And I could see her like with getting more and more parts like this, I could see her sort of slowly starting to find a groove in stories like this. So it's a struggle at first, but I feel like she was getting there by the end. So we'll continue to see what else she can do with parts like this, and I'm interested to find out if she can finally find that. And then Ty Sheridan here has obviously been making an impact for quite a while now. To my understanding, it was actually Nicolas Cage that got him this part, because obviously Cage and Schrader are quite familiar with each other, and I think it was supposed to be Shia LaBeouf that was going to be in this part, and then he had a scheduling conflict. And it was Cage that said, hey, I did it, Joe, with Ty Sheridan, and he basically just recommended him, and obviously that ended up paying off, because what Sheridan does here that's really great is he's got to have that sort of naive vibe about him, where he's basically coming into Oscar Isaac's world, or forcing himself into Oscar Isaac's world, and this is not a place that somebody that hasn't seen the shit that, Isaac has seen is ready for, and not even close. Like, you can't even pretend to be in this world. But he's driven just enough by this dark place, a dark place that, as cliche as it is, they don't really, mention this explicitly, I don't think, at least I don't remember, that Isaac can probably see a bit of his own previous darkness in here, which also opens up that area of this could be a moment of atonement to sort of put a stop to what Ty Sheridan is planning. That involves Willem Dafoe, another Schrader regular who gave us the fucking wild and insane performance he did in Dog Eat Dog, which is... and here also he's playing a pretty vicious character. It's much more of a viciousness that we learn about through other characters than we actually see. But obviously, Willem Dafoe could do this kind of thing in his sleep also, and we get a sense, like, in the small screen time that he has, that he's a character that's capable of the shit that we know that he's done, just being told through these characters. But the idea of, because of Sheridan playing these two particular parts so well, the naivete, but also the being in a really dark place and being really driven, it's this really interesting recipe for this character to be potentially unpredictable. And the way he's able to play that, where we're not really sure what direction he's going to go. And we can see Isaac seem to get through to him, but all these, like, the way it sets up one thing and then another, you're never quite sure which path is going to end up going down. And that's the kind of thing that's great for a movie like this, because that kind of stuff. Like I said, sounds cliche when you just put it in those terms. So it's like the way you kind of have to set up, like, oh, I mean, I can see what they're doing, but ultimately I know the path this is going to go down. But there's always an uncertainty throughout it because of the way these characters are played and the way the story kind of unfolds. Um, and its individual scenes are really helping this along also. Like, I could see people being unsatisfied overall with the total of the movie, but just everything was working for me, and that only increased how well these individual scenes stood out. There's a couple of, like, usually for a really great performance you have like there's great scenes, but then there's the one standout scene, and Isaac at the very least gets two really really big scenes, one of which is an interesting way to do the big scene, because when you think of that you think of somebody like yelling and screaming or something like that, but he does get this incredible monologue that, if I remember correctly, is done without cutting away. And it's this really quiet intensity, where it's like it's a really big monologue, but it's practically whispered. But being in Oscar Isaac's low voice, it has just as much intensity as if he was screaming this monologue, which is incredible. Also, another one of those things about how he could really go big, but you can just through like a small tick or something, you can see everything. There's one particular moment that I was really loving where Ty Sheridan's telling him his backstory and where he's coming from and why he's planning what he's planning. And it's at this moment where we can see, Oscar Isaac has seen it all, so he's basically just talking to a brick wall at this point. And then Sheridan says just one more thing, just one slight development, and we see, like, his head sort of lightly nod, almost to the point that the nod is non-existent. But then it's like I said, it's almost like you get this sort of different visual of the character just through something that small, and the fact that he has like such control over his expression to where that nod was not overplayed at all, when it just so easily could have been. It's like I don't even know how someone accomplishes that much control of their expression. What Oscar Isaac has found, and then obviously there's another later scene that's a bit bigger, but with the same amount of intensity, where he kind of helps Ty Sheridan get a little more into his mind and see the darkness that could come if he makes the wrong decision. And it's a fucking brilliant scene, and there's so many brilliant scenes throughout this. And like we were saying, about cards being like an afterthought as far as the big picture goes. I was thinking about that for a while before it really started to unfold, where it's like, when we're getting what's going on with Isaac's backstory, where he was like an interrogator for the military, and the dark places that ended up going, and then like the card playing, I was like, these are two things that don't really feel like they mesh, or like they're meshing very well so far. But then, like, as it goes on and you realize that this story is significantly about one of these things more than it is the other, and the other is basically just an attempted lifestyle to get away from the other one. And it's like to show the concentration inside the mind of Isaac's character through something like card counting, can take you to what was like the mindset he would have had back then also, and the way he's able to the way his mind zeroes in, just because it's basically built that way, and to be able to have to break away from that when something is in there that you do not want in there, it's quite harrowing, especially with the way it's all played out. So yeah, that's I feel like to say anything else would be saying too much, so I think I'll just leave this at this. But I was really, it's one of those movies where, like, you're either into it right away and you're into it right away, or you're probably gonna struggle a little bit to get into it. But like, if you're immediately intrigued by this character and you want to know more, and Isaac's performance is really really grabbing you, you should be fine. That should be enough to carry you through and maintain you really wanting the rest of this movie, the way that I did. So I'm really happy. It's one of my favorites of the year right now. So I'm really really happy with this. So. I guess that's going to be it for these three. The next thing is, I'm not sure. The schedule's all in disarray now. I'm going to have to switch some things up. But there's going to be more verses and franchise videos and stuff like that. And then we'll see what I was like. We'll get an awards video in by the end of the month, and we'll see where things are with that. So all that stuff. So until whatever the next thing is, I think that's it.